3 months ago, we lost over $150,000 in pure profit as a 16-year-old personally. And that's more money than most people have ever made at 16. And I want to go over how we did it and how we actually ended up in depth for a while. And it's a painful story, but I wanted to go over it so that hopefully some of you guys don't repeat the same mistakes that I once made. So we got a document here that I'm going to be going over step by step how we managed to lose an absurd amount of money. And let me start off with some cautions. Number one, I'm fully debt free. We are highly profitable. We're at 50% profit margins, doing very well for ourselves. And this 3-month period was 6 to 3 months ago. So it's been 1 quarter since it happened, and we've been able to fully recover. And I want everybody to know that now we're doing very well. But it was a painful period where all of our front-end numbers looked great. We were doing 500,000 a month. We were doing incredible, but the back end, we were just burning money. And today I'll explain exactly how that happened. So first big mistake we did was that we didn't track any numbers whatsoever, pretty much. Okay, the most important numbers that we should be tracking that we didn't was our churn, our lifetime value, our lifetime gross profit, dispute rate, refund rate, collection rate of money we should get from our partners, how much of that we actually collect. Because people would think it's 100%, right? If you make $100, you'll actually get $100. Truth is, when you work with small business owners, oftentimes it's not, right? We also didn't know our actual profit and loss. So how much profit we actually made. We didn't know our actual revenue, our actual payroll on a week-to-week basis, which is a mess when you have 49 employees like we did at one point. And as a result, we guessed instead of analyzed. And we overestimated both our projected revenue and our customer value, right? So when we made guesses of how much can we spend in marketing, we made those guesses based on a customer value that wasn't even accurate. Additionally, we failed to account for the fact that some partners never pay, some partners dispute, some partners refund. And then you make really poor decisions, right? Because even if only 2% of your customers want a dispute or refund, and that's still, if you have 20% profit margins, that takes 10% of your profit. And 10% of your profit is a lot, right? If you do 10 of those mistakes, you end up with no profit. So it's bigger of a mistake than you might think, especially if you cover your ad spend for your partners like we did, then it just burns money. So the biggest mistake of them all, over anything else, was that we did not track our numbers like we should, which goes into our next one, which is that we miscalculated our back-end revenue, also partially because we didn't track our numbers properly, but most of our revenue came from back-end appointment setting, where we charge our partners every time we book an appointment for them, okay? And we counted on the fact that we would have to spend $200 per appointment to be able to get an appointment for our partners. But that number wasn't even met most of the time. It was met like 10% of the time, but we were always optimistic, thinking we'd have the perfect team and so on. So in reality, our cost per show averaged $350. And this absolutely slashed our revenue. Like you can imagine, we got half of the amount of appointments we expected, meaning we only made 50% of the money we should have made. We should have spent 40% of our time optimizing the appointment setting, because the ISA department, as we call it, is quite literally the most critical function of the whole company. It's how we make our money. But we spend 10% of our time on it. Then let's talk about some expensive and unnecessary hires, okay? So I'm mentioning some names here. I'm not gonna say that these names are who these names were or anything alike, because I want to keep it confidential and I don't want to point anybody out, okay? So don't worry about who the names is. It's just for you to be able to reference it easier in your mind. So first one is Seth. Seth was highly experienced and capable, but he wasn't essential to our current needs, right? So this was somebody who had built billion-dollar companies. He was incredible, by far the most talented person I've ever worked with. But who said we even needed him? We had a imaginary goal of getting to $1 billion in 12 months, and then we said, why don't we get everybody in the whole world to work for us? But we didn't actually have a place and a time. And he had a 1% revenue share and a 150K base. So that was expensive. And when we were doing 100k or say 200k when he came in, and we had 20% profit margins, we only made 40k. So what we didn't understand at the time was this took 40% of our profit, 40%, but we didn't understand it at the time because we didn't, once again, track our numbers. Leo was hired as an ISA manager, but we didn't need him whatsoever. We were already overstaffed. We had one ISA manager that wasn't even booked out. We were just thinking of needing him in a month, and therefore we felt like we should hire him now. And a big mistake, we hired him based on hunger or even perceived hunger. So he seemed really hungry. He said that he was going to be the hardest worker in the room. He said that he'd never sleep, never stop, that he'd work 7 days a week, that he'd have super high standards. Number one, we didn't even know if he actually had that hunger and work ethic or if that was just something he said. Secondly, we did not vet for any skill or any experience. Not a single test assignment, not a single reference call. We just thought he sounded good. Okay, so that was a big mistake that we've learned. Now, this is going to sound crazy to some of you guys, but I care more about how well somebody's references say about a person than how well the person speaks themselves on the interview. I put more emphasis on the reference call when I possibly hire somebody or the test assignment than the actual interview. And it's been one of the best decisions we've ever made. Another thing is he had a 7k a month base plus a small commission after the team's appointment. We let him go after 1 week and paid him for the week after that. So we paid him $2,600 for just training. Burned $2,600, which when we were making up to 500 grand, it doesn't sound like a lot, but a lot of those small mistakes add up. Now, hiring without performance impact. So Angel was a super great friend of mine, and he's still a great friend, and he's skilled. But there were a few major issues. Number one, he wasn't needed at the time. We truly didn't need him. I just saw him as being somebody good, so I thought I'd bring him on. Secondly, even though he ended up being a good team member and employee, he did not have any test assignments or any proper interviewing. He was overpaid like crazy too. 15k a month base plus 8k the first month, right? And he also had a profit share. So he was paid like a Fortune 500 company would pay somebody in this role. But we were a startup that was making just 150k in revenue when we brought him in. So he took half of our profit, not because he's a bad person, but we didn't know business, right? When we truly didn't even need him. And then the biggest mistake was that we didn't have any clear KPIs or goals, and he got pretty much no training. So he implemented a bunch of systems. He hired 4 team members, I think, but our cost per lead, cost per booking, and booking percentage never improved. So the numbers, I know it sounds crazy, but it happens often. The numbers stayed exact same when we brought on somebody who was incredibly expensive to do that full time. We also hired 4 new media buyers with our permission. So he was allowed to hire as many people as he wanted. He hired 4 people, increasing the cost of the whole media buying department from $4,000 a month to $25,000 a month. But the biggest difference was that we had no improved results. So we pretty much 5x the cost of the media buying department without getting any more results. The mistake here was overhiring, no performance correlation or seeing what the performance actually was, and retaining poor people too long, which is a mistake we've done over and over again, which most people do in their business. They see that somebody ain't good enough, and then they sit on that decision for weeks, sometimes months, before letting the person go. We've switched now to the mantra that if there is doubt about anybody in your team, there's no doubt. And what I mean by that is, if you're doubtful of if this person is good enough, there's no doubt they're not going to be good enough. Because if you think about the best people on your team, you've never had doubt about them. Now, one of the key people in our team that was going to make the biggest impact and manage the most important department, we hired the totally wrong person. And Calvin was going to be the ISA manager. So Calvin had no test assignment. He was given an 8k base, and he would probably have accepted much less or even no base. But we still gave him an 8k base because we didn't know how to manage money. He got very little guidance, very little coaching, and we retained him way too long, although we knew that he wasn't good enough. And we just ignore the brutal fact that he wasn't gonna be the best person we could ever find. He was also allowed to hire underqualified team members without us carefully interviewing every single person. And he was given full control over our most important department without proving himself first. Now, in proper credit policy, we allowed our partners to self-report no-shows or cancellations to get credits. So we had no QC. Our partners could say, hey, this appointment no-showed, even though it didn't. Then we didn't get paid. But what if the appointment actually did not no-show and it did happen? Then we got no money for it. So this resulted in 13% of revenue being credited, when the real number should have been 5. So we lost out on 8% of revenue. That goes straight to the bottom line, which means that we lost out on 8% of profit. But if we had 10% profit margins, that means that we lost 80% of our profit thanks to a small little mistake like this. Now, unprofitable sales offer. This is one of the most painful ones, and it's so obvious looking back on it. We offered prepaid appointment discounts at our front-end offer, with 20% closer commissions, 5% setter commissions, and 15% manager commissions. We had 5 pricing tiers that I'll show you in a minute. So we lost up to $4.8 thousand. Yes, that's almost $5,000 per partner we signed. Imagine that. Most people make money when they sign a partner. We lost up to $5,000 whenever we signed a new partner. And we estimate that this offer costed us $20,000 of pure profit before we shut it down, which with 10% profit margins was 1 month of profit that we lost. So here was the pricing that we had, which looks incredibly good. It looks super high ticket, looks like a killer offer. But we just burnt money. And the more they paid up front, the more money we lost. Here we lost $4.8,000. Here we lost like 3.5. Here we lost 2. Here we lost 1, and here we broke even. But we didn't know that because we didn't track the data and we didn't look at the data. Then we overcompensated the sales team. So we paid 20% closer commissions, 5% setter commissions, 15% to the sales manager, that then went up all the way to 20% for the sales manager. So the overall cost throughout the whole team was just insanely high. I put 35 here. Actually, now looking at it, it's 40. We had 40% of initial cash that just went to the sales team, while we were giving discounts that made us totally unprofitable. It should have been 10% to the closers, 3 to 5 to the managers, and 3 to the setters. This one's big too. We covered our partners' ad spend and just increased our fee per appointment without even knowing if we were profitable on it. So we spent $50K on ads and made $50K back. That's break even. That's not factoring in the media buying team, the ISAs or appointment setters, the partner success managers, and so on. So we lost money on this. We can't say exactly how much, but we lost quite a bit, plus a lot of time. Roughly 10% of our money was lost thanks to disputes and refunds. And this isn't something you can ever get 100% away from, but we'll talk about how we fix this later on. Stripe reserve. Stripe took $27K, so almost $30,000 between our 2 Stripe accounts that we have, which was one of the most expensive mistakes we ever made. Staying on Stripe, which if you guys still use Stripe, I highly urge you, and I know that Stripe's probably going to sue me for saying this, but I highly urge you to switch away from them. At least setting up a backend, okay? A backup offer, a backup processor. Because Stripe literally have in their contract that they can steal your money whenever they want. And they did to us, so we lost $27,000. And that month, we had already lost like $30,000. So that 27 extra lost us more than the profit that we had made that month and the month before. That all sucks. Now let's talk about solutions. I'll hurry up, go through this quickly to not waste your time. So number 1, now we track all the right data. And so we are tracking churn, lifetime value, lifetime gross profit, dispute rate, refund rate, collection rate. We've already implemented tracking for partner ad spend profitability, appointment profitability per partner, cost per show, profit and loss. So we have a proper profit and loss tracker, which I could even show you guys. This is kind of stuff that nobody on YouTube shows because they don't want to show their actual numbers. But here's been the numbers recently. So you can see here how some days we've been losing money, some days we've been making great money. But you can see day to day the actual money we get and the money we spend. And most people don't have this, including ourselves in the beginning, and it's insane. A daily cash balance where we can see where our resources are and where our money is going out and about to go out. We're also now just taking data-driven decisions. So we expect 30% underperformance. What I mean by that is if our close rate is 30%, when we make numbers to, for example, make a split test, we forecast 20% close rate. So if we want to figure out the profitability of a new Facebook ad campaign that we're going to run, and we see that, okay, our cost per lead is probably going to be $10, we count it as $13. So we always expect to get 30% worse results than the reality, which makes sure that we don't get hurt by surprises. Now, we only hire when needed and with clear purpose. We only hire if the role is urgently needed, the person has a clear goal and outcome, and the person solves that purpose. All hires go through very deep reference checks, skill-based test assignments, and experience-based vetting. Most of these three, or all of these three, are more important than the actual interview you do with people. But most people skip this, especially small business owners, people that are just starting out, including myself in the past. So I highly urge you to do this. We also define how each hire will be paying for themselves. So if you hire a finance person, for example, you got to figure out how can I make sure that this finance person pays for themselves. Meaning if they're going to cost $100,000 a year, how can they make you more than $100,000 a year in profit back? Strict credit process. So now partners must apply for a credit with a clear reason. Then we quality control or quality assure that credit, and we approve it if it's an accurate credit, meaning we only give them the money back on an appointment when they want the money back if the lead actually no-showed and we can prove it. I know that's a bit complicated, no need for you to understand it, but basically make sure that you don't give people money back without a reason. It's the simple answer. We have a profitable offer structure. So at the moment, we're actually not selling. We're just perfecting our backend. But if and when we start selling again, the offer will be profitable upfront. We collect 5 to 8K in the first payment to cover the cost to acquire the customer and the team costs. For example, if the cost to acquire the customer is 4K, the initial payment that the partner pays us must be more than that 4K. Now we also have partners prepaying 3 appointments at a time automatically. This improves cash flow, partner commitment because they go more upfront, less churn because the less times that somebody gets billed, the less times they have time to look at, oh, am I losing money on this? Am I spending money on this? And therefore they churn less, and so on. Plus we have a 100% collection ratio when we have partners prepay appointments because we're never going to send them an appointment unless they've already prepaid for it. Now, we only cover ad spend for partners when we're highly profitable on it and know that we will. And we see our exact profitability per partner and scale the ones that actually perform. This one's big, handling disputes and refunds. Now, this is still in progress, but improvements that we are making include signing contracts with all partners where we can win all disputes that they make. Overall, just having a better service and better communication with partners. Working with larger businesses that are less likely to dispute and get better, and overall just get better results. Stronger legal language in our contracts and clearer terms, and using platforms like Count to prevent fraud and disputes. And most importantly, I urge everybody here to follow this one. We're no longer using Stripe. Stripe can quite literally take your money whenever they want and hold it for as long as they want. They did that to us. We lost 30 grand. I urge you to not make the same mistake. We're now using an alternative payment processor and working towards a dedicated merchant account. The one we use, by the way, is Fanbases. I'm not getting paid to say that in any way, but Fanbases has been absolutely great to us. They're a relatively small company and done nothing but good stuff for us. So we're super, super happy with them. With that said, that's all I got for you guys. Appreciate your time. Hopefully this was somewhat valuable. And I urge you to just at least take one thing out of that. If you still use Stripe, stop using Stripe. Or if you don't track your numbers, start tracking your numbers. If you can just take one thing out of that, you might save yourself $150,000. And with that, I'll end off by saying again, it was a great learning experience. It was the 3 months in my life where I learned the most that I've ever learned. And I wouldn't have been here today with the knowledge I have unless I went through those 3 months of pain and excruciating pain and putting myself in a position where I couldn't even pay the team for a while and so on. But now I'm back where I'm highly profitable. Everybody's paid off. I've even been able to pay more than I should have to people that weren't getting paid from other people on my team that were supposed to pay. And I'm just overall really fortunate to have gone through all of this. And I got nothing but gratitude because you live and you learn. And I've learned more as a 16-year-old with this than most people do when they're 50. And that's not me bragging. That's just me being grateful for what I've done up to this point. With that said, if I don't have anything to sell you, but if you do want to work in our agency, which we're trying to take to $1 billion still, then please click below. Feel free to apply. I'm also going to reference this document that I went through in the description of this video. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.